Hello, and welcome to the Meditation Movement podcast with the British School of Meditation.
In this podcast, we will share all things meditation, including showcasing the wonderful work that our register of meditation teachers are doing all over the country and further afield in helping so many people benefit from this amazing practice.
Meditation and community are our two biggest passions, and we can't wait to share them both with you in this space.
So sit back, relax, maybe even close your eyes, and don't forget to breathe. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Meditation Movement. I'm absolutely delighted to have Dr. David Hamilton with us today. And Dr. David Hamilton, if you haven't already heard of him, has already got 12 books out, I believe. Is it 12, David?
12 now, yeah, 12.
Yeah, 12 books. But previously, he was in the pharmaceutical industry as a scientist. I understand studying cardiovascular conditions and also cancer. Have I got that right as well? Lovely.
Yep.
But you felt really inspired to leave when you were seeing more about the placebo and the great effects that was having with the mind and the body, and decided to start writing about it, which I'm eternally grateful for, because I have learnt so much from your books. I think I've almost got all of them now.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah, and you are a really great friend to the British School of Meditation. Over the years, we've had you come and speak to our members, our graduates, our students, and everybody, it's always really well received. In fact, the latest session, nobody wanted to leave. That was...
Oh, that's great. That's such great feedback. I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So part of what we're going to be chatting about today is obviously meditation, but one of the things we really wanted to talk about is your new book, which has just come out over the last few weeks. And which I was away on holiday when it came out. It was there waiting for me on my doormat when I returned. And I read it from cover to cover as soon as I could. And I couldn't put it down. I absolutely could not put it down.
You.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I had my husband watching a film. And I kept getting him to put it on pause so I could read out these bits from the book. Going, oh, listen to this, listen to this.
Wow.
So congratulations, David.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, but this is a different book. This is a different style of writing to what we've seen before. Do you want to tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah. So the different style of writing really was to try to reach a broader audience, younger people as well as everyone else. I think I was looking at my previous books on kindness, and I thought, where I enjoy those books and I love the content, I think we need more kindness in society, and I think not enough people know about it and understand the different ways that it supports your mental health, your physical health. And I thought I need to find a way of communicating with more people, really. So I decided to go for an abrupt change of title and an abrupt change of writing style, something that was more fluid and lighter and conversational and also quirky at times, so that, like you said, you couldn't put it down, you can read it and sometimes you can smile because you can say the same thing in a multitude of different ways. So what I tried to do was try to say things in a kind of lighter, quirkier way that makes it easier to read and more enjoyable to read. And in that kind of sense, hopefully, it's the sort of stuff that more and more people will have access to, rather than just people who genuinely have a thirst for the science of kindness. Let's open it up to more people, and this with the sincere hope that when more people read it, then we bring more kindness into society.
Do you feel as a society that we are quite switched off from that, from the art of kindness?
I think we go through phases. I think what I have seen, and this book is a wee bit of a counter to that. I have seen I've seen a growth in the number of people who really, let's say, don't give a fuck don't have any concern for the consequences of their words and actions. And so this book really is a counter to that growing trend of not having any regard for the consequences of the things that we say to each other and publicly, and the things that we do. I think there's
Yeah.
just not enough. There's not enough awareness that your words have consequences. Words can hurt. Words can lift, but words can hurt. Actions can
Absolutely.
lift, but actions can hurt. And I think there's just been so much of just I don't give a fuck kind of thing, and just saying and doing what you like. And I think that is taking its toll now. And so one of the thrusts behind this book was trying to counter that growing trend.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder whether COVID had an impact on that as well, because, people kind of went into a bit of self-preservation, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I guess when we go into self-preservation, I guess we put that armor on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's about saying, kindness, being kind and supportive and encouragement, it's safe. And it's that, Sarah, it's actually what we're supposed to do. And here's the thing. We have kind genes, right? We are genetically wired for kindness. It's helping each other out, supporting each other, encouraging each other. That is what got the human species this far over hundreds of millions of years. So we actually have developed kind genes. It's why when you help someone on a deep level, it feels satisfying. There's something right. There's a rightness to it. And the rightness to it comes, it's like nature encoded in your genes from the relics of the memories of your ancient ancestors saying, yes, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what we're supposed to help each other out. And so when we don't, we start to develop stress. This is why being unkind is stressful, and it's actually damaging to our health. Not giving a fuck, to use the term I've used already. When we don't have any regard for the consequences of our words and actions, that actually begins to take its toll long term, because we're not supposed to be like that. We're supposed to be kind. That's why we're genetically wired in this way.
I love that as well. And you're right, because myself and my husband and my children, we've just been for a holiday in the States, and we were trying to navigate at times public transport. And there were two occasions, one in San Francisco and one in New York, where a couple of locals helped us.
Yeah.
And the kindness of them, just noticing that we looked a
Yeah.
bit stuck, really made me feel so good. It elevated us as a family,
Yeah.
and I really hope that they went away feeling good too.
Yeah.
To the point that I was then looking for moments where I could then be someone that was kind to somebody else. And
Pay it
there
forward.
there is a ripple effect, because you write
Yeah.
about this in your book, don't you?
Yeah. There really is a ripple effect. In fact, what you experienced is what psychologists actually. I think the first person to use the term was Jonathan Haidt, a social psychologist, who coined the term elevation. It's that feeling that you get when someone helps you or when you help someone else. We used to call it helper's high, but elevation is a much broader term, because it isn't just about feeling a high. It is also a sense of satisfaction, a sense of rightness. There's a whole host of positive ways that you can feel when you help someone or when someone helps you. So we call it elevation. But elevation is like the force behind the ripple effect. For example, when these people helped you and you felt good about that, that's elevation. And what you wanted to do in that elevated state, naturally, because that's what we do naturally, is we want to help someone else. And what you do is you pass it out. But what's interesting, Sarah, is researchers at Harvard and Yale found that actually goes out, that ripple through elevation actually goes out to what's called 3 degrees of separation. And what that means is, so these people helped you, and because of how you feel, that you and your family feel, you help someone else, or you're kind or kinder to someone else. Now that someone else is at 1 degree of separation from the initial people that helped you. But then those people feeling elevated will now be kind or kinder to someone else, because they'll feel, oh, Sarah and her family helped me. I feel really good. I feel naturally inclined to help someone else, who are now at 2 degrees of separation from the original people that helped you. And then they're feeling elevated. They naturally want to help someone else. And the someone else is at 3 degrees of separation. So there's been a ripple effect from the people that helped you that's gone on way past these people. They've just helped you, then got on with the rest of their day. Without what they didn't know is what happened next. But where it gets really interesting is there's an R number to kindness. From COVID days, we know what the R number means. It's a reproducibility rate. It means how many people are impacted at each step. So it turns out that the R number of kindness is somewhere between 3 and 5. And what that means is, let's use an example. Let's say you started it out by being kind to someone. So you help someone and they're feeling elevated. So that because of how they now feel, they will now be likely to be kind or kinder to 5 people. Let's use the R number of 5 to really make the point. So what that means is you've been kind to people, and they will now be kind or kinder to 5 people. That's what the R number means. So it spreads out. And now each of those 5 people now feeling elevated because they are grateful or inspired or just feeling nice about it because you helped them. They will now, each of them will be kind or kinder to 5 people. And those 5 people are now at 2 degrees of separation from you. So you now have 25 people. So 5 people that are inspired by you, you're helping, are at 1 degree, 25 people at 2 degrees, but each of these 25 will be kind or kinder to 5 people because they're feeling touched and lifted in some kind of way. And so what you now have is 125 people benefiting from your initial act of kindness. And that's the bit, Sarah, we don't see. Because each of us do what are seemingly small acts of kindness. Like to these people that helped you with the transport that day, that's probably something that they do, that type of thing, without really giving a thought. You help someone, then you get on with the rest of your day. What you don't see is the 125 people on the receiving end through that ripple effect. What you don't see is the bit that happens afterwards. It's like you drop a pebble in a pond and then you walk away. What you don't see is the wee wave powering out the other side of the pond. You've got lily pads going up and down, and they don't know why they're rising and falling, but they're doing that because of the wave. And the wave is caused by the pebble dropped in a pond, but the pebble dropped in a pond is a metaphor for an act of kindness that you drop into life, and then you walk away. And what you don't see is the wave of kindness that keeps going for the next day or two, that's impacting a heck of a lot of people.
Yeah, it's really true as well. And the thing is for us as well, we were noticing, like, say if we were in a bar or restaurant and a member of staff was a little bit stressed.
Yeah.
We were then thinking, oh, I wonder if this person's having a bad day. And we were finding we were much more compassionate towards that person.
Yeah.
You know, so it was just having these wonderful ripples because we were, I guess, that elevated state. You mentioned something about this as well, about you don't always know what's going on in somebody's life. You mentioned that in the book because there was an experience that happened to you, wasn't there?
Yeah. I think, I have probably said in my life, Sarah, hundreds of times, whether it's just an open conversation or whether it's when I'm giving a talk, I've said, be kind because you never know what people are dealing with. But one of the experiences that kind of shaped the idea for this book was I found myself on the other side of that. So I lost my dad not long before I started working on this book. He'd had a brain tumour, glioblastoma. And I used to take my dad, and my mum would always be there as well, to many of his hospital appointments. I've got 3 sisters, but they work full time, two are in the NHS, so they don't have the same freedom. Given the different times of my dad's appointment, they would have to take a lot of time off work. Whereas being self-employed, I can work my time, I can fit my time. So but I wanted to do it anyway. So I used to drive my mum and dad, but it was very important to my dad to get there really early, like 40 minutes early, kind of thing, partly because it was a 35-mile drive from my mum and dad's house to the hospital that we went to in Edinburgh. And my dad's always aware of traffic, so he really needed to be there 30-40 minutes early. Plus, it's also the way the tumour affected him. He got a bit anxious about we don't make it in time. And there was one, and we always made it really, sometimes we were an hour early, but there was one day that I found myself running a bit late, and I was annoyed at myself that I'd allowed wee bits of work and other things that really could have waited. And I allowed these things to get in the way, and I was annoyed at myself, and I was driving along the road in my head thinking, oh my God, we might only be there 15 minutes early. Still early for most people. That's a lot of people just rock up on time or 5 minutes late without any regard. But my dad needed to be there early. It's just the way that the tumour affected him. And I was upset at myself for the fact that I was now going to cause my dad some anxiety. And I knew that by the time I get to the house, mum and dad would be down in the car park waiting on me to save an extra couple of seconds because the car park's like 50 metres away from the house. And so I'm driving along the road and I'm totally in my head, and I pulled off at the roundabout out just at the outskirts of the village. And I was so in my head, worrying about the fact I was late, worrying about the prognosis and all these different things that just get in your head. And it's difficult, despite the best will in the world, to manage your state at these kind of times. And I pulled onto a roundabout and I wasn't fully paying attention. And there was a gentleman on the roundabout with his car, and both of us just rammed our foot on the brakes, screeched to a halt, and we missed each other by a centimetre. I mean, literally. And if we had have had an accident, it would have been entirely my fault because I wasn't looking where I was going. And what I expected in that moment, Sarah, is what happens on the road all the time. We don't think about it, we just react. Horn, a loud horn that we keep the horn on for an extra few seconds just to teach the lesson, and a mouthful of swear words. But that isn't what happened. What actually happened was he smiled with a really soft face, and he lifted his hand and he said, "It's okay, on you go." Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how to take it, because it was the opposite of what I actually expected. And to this extent, I went, thanks, and I stumbled and I started up and I drove round. I must have been 50 metres, 100 metres at the most along the road, where I just spontaneously burst into tears. Mm-hmm. And I was so overcome with the kindness that he showed me and the compassion that I could see in his face. And it also neutralised, or it brought to the surface all the stuff that I was suppressing about my fear of my dad, and I was trying to be positive and all that, and it all just came flooding out, but in a kind of nice way, in a kind of cathartic way. It was just, and I remember at that point thinking, I couldn't have coped if he'd have peeped his horn and swore at me, which is what people do in the roads. I couldn't have coped, despite the public face I showed. The upbeat social media videos when I'm talking about kindness. I was really fragile inside, because my dad was a private man, so nobody knew. My dad didn't want people to know. Outside of family and a very small circle of friends, no one knew how unwell my dad was. No one knew he had a tumour. So in respect for his privacy, I didn't tell anyone either. So not until the very, very end, no one really knew. And so no one on my social media videos and the public face that I was showing to the world at my talks and all that, no one knew what I was really dealing with on the inside. And I wouldn't have been able to cope had he swore at me. I don't know maybe I'd have burst out into tears, or I don't know what I would have done. I think some people in these situations get angry and fight back and stuff. But none of that happened, because he showed me compassion and kindness. And that is the first time that I can remember. There's probably been other times, but that's the first time I can remember, Sarah, in my life, being on the receiving end when I'm struggling and someone showed me kindness rather than anger.
Yeah. It's like one of those incredibly profound moments, isn't it? That just makes an imprint, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it really hit home for me, the meaning of that line that I've uttered so many times. Be kind, because you never know what people are dealing with. And I've said it so many times, to the point that I don't even think about it. It's just something that you say because you know it's right. But I really got the meaning of it that day. I really took it on board at a cellular level, so to speak. I took it on board in a different way. And that was that story was one of the factors that shaped the content of this book. And the way that it was written, and the reason why it was written.
Yeah.
Is that something we really need to embrace in society?
I think we do. Someone's acting up, they're suffering inside, aren't they?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you are acting up, but if people are acting badly, it's because there's some kind of suffering going on, and we never know. We never know what's going on.
We never know. And it doesn't necessarily always excuse bad behavior. But if you can find that thought first, this is what I try to do. I try to find the thought first. If someone's being unkind, for example, I try to reach for that thought. You never know what someone's dealing with, or you never know what they've gone through in their life that's brought them to this point in this way of behaviour right now. Now, it doesn't necessarily excuse behaviour, and it doesn't necessarily change the behaviour, but it might change how you feel about it.
Exactly.
And then you might not react stressfully or angrily. You might react, and you might act in an empowered way rather than react. And then everything can change from that point.
Yeah, because often when other people act up, it's how we respond that we get more upset about, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
Quite
yeah,
often.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I
yeah.
really love that.
Yeah.
So,
And it's not always easy to find for it. So it's not
no,
always easy to find that thought. Sometimes, depending on the situation, you've got to flip it round and say, well, I need to look out for myself now, because this type of behavior is so consistent, and it's hard for me. I'm not in the space emotionally that I'm able to find that thought or feel that thought. So I have to now flip it round, and I've got to look out for myself. And
yeah.
sometimes that means leaving the room, whatever leaving the room means in the context of your life.
Yeah, and I guess I think it's Brené Brown talks about compassion with boundaries. You
Yeah,
can
yeah,
feel compassionate, but you've got those boundaries where you go,
absolutely.
I've got to preserve myself here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And that's different for different people, and it depends on your life. It depends on where you're at, and it depends on that type of experience and whether it's been a repeating experience or not. It really depends. But one of the things I found when I was writing that section of the book, I call these kindness conundrums. It really just means kindness in real life. You know, what's it like actually on the ground in family life and in the workplace and all different situations. And there's no one size fits all. I wrote that section thinking I'll give people exact guidelines. Here's what you do if such and such is happening, but you can't do that because we all have a different life. We have a different background. We have different beliefs, different circumstances in our lives. What works for one person might not exactly work for another. So I approached it from that perspective that there's different ways to approach, and it depends on you, and just do the best you can, but don't give yourself a hard time if you don't manage to do what you would ultimately like to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What I really love is that you use this word kindfulness, which is a kind of play on words of mindfulness and kindness. And
Yeah.
I really, really loved as well that you really explain about what mindfulness is, in the sense that there's the more modern version, you know, that we kind of a buzzword at the moment, but you actually take it right back and say, this was more about a moral compass.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved reading that. I really, really did. That was, because sometimes we have the diluted version and we miss really what it's, what the fundamentals of where it came from and what it was all about.
Yeah, and the reason why I did all that is because mindfulness meditation, which Buddhist scholars refer to as contemporary meditation, contemporary mindfulness or Western mindfulness, was just really one technique that was part of a set of guidelines that were all about having a more kind and compassionate moral compass. It was all about, it wasn't just about me, it was about we. It was about learning how to develop myself, but in the context of the environment and the people who I'm around. So the purpose of it is so that I can be of more value to society, because no person is an island. We're not lonesome on this big blue planet. We share the planet. So it was about saying, how can I develop myself on a spiritual level so that I'm of more value and a better influence on even younger people, kind of thing. But to make it palatable in the West, all of that kind of stuff was stripped away. And it had to be because mindfulness was initially taught in a hospital environment. When Jon Kabat-Zinn, an academic himself, recognized how valuable mindfulness could be, how incredibly helpful it could be, particularly and he originally pitched it to people who were struggling with pain. So it was like a kind of pain clinic, and he realized that mindfulness could be so incredibly helpful, especially people who are not responding to treatment, who are essentially falling through the cracks in the healthcare system. So let's teach them mindfulness, and it was so incredibly helpful. It was amazingly, in fact, so helpful that within a year, the head of this massive teaching hospital, had brought it into become an official part of the Department of Medicine. That's how incredibly helpful mindfulness was. But the only way for that to happen is if Kabat-Zinn was able to shed all of the background, all of the context, all of the be a kind person kind of stuff, because you can't go around professing morals and ethics around people who are vulnerable. Regardless of your best intentions, you've got to make it completely secular. And so, because it was such a big hit, mindfulness swept through the Western world as a meditation technique. And over the years, especially when it became big on apps, when now most people who learn mindfulness get it from an app, nowadays, or at least they get their introduction from an app, was sort of completely forgotten the original context about being a good person. You know, and some research went into that. Buddhist scholars said there must be a consequence of having taken out of the original kind and compassionate consequence. And what researchers found is that mindfulness on its own stretches us on the inside. It's just like yoga stretches you physically. Mindfulness stretches you on the inside in the direction of who you are already. So in the direction of your core values. So it turns out that kind people and people high in empathy who practice mindfulness become even kinder, which tallies exactly with most of the people like yourself, Sarah, and other people that I know who practice mindfulness, who are wonderfully kind and generous people, because you were already like that. It just made you even more sympathetic to that. But the downside was people low in empathy, or people whose worldview was very much more, it's all about me, and very I-focused, even people on the narcissistic end of the scale. What happens when they practice mindfulness, according to this research, is they become even less kind than they would have done had they not done any practice at all. It's like it stretched them more in the direction of me, and they become even more self-absorbed. And so kindfulness is almost an antidote. So what I was explaining in the book about kindfulness was a reintroduction, not the religious sense, but reintroduction of the basic concept of education and compassion, empathy, compassion, and kindness, back into mindfulness. Whether it's just 1 minute of a 10-minute practice where you just say a wee silent prayer for someone that you know who's having a hard time, or even if it's just a little bit of education on how kindness matters in the world, or how we're all interconnected and how there are consequences to kind and unkind words and actions. Just a tiny little sprinkle of kindness into Western secular mindfulness turns it into kindfulness. And then research shows everyone shifts at the base. Everyone becomes kinder as a consequence.
That's brilliant. You touched on sometimes it's just a case of saying some phrases, and that works really nicely with the Metta Bhavana, which is loving kindness. It's one of the meditations we teach meditation teachers in British School of Meditation, and the research into that practice is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. It's actually one of the most well-studied meditations in science, and I think the reason why is because when we're saying these, kind and compassionate phrases, everyone doing the practice, let's say there's 100 people being studied, everyone's feeling more or less the same sort of sentiment. So researchers can then measure the biological, the neurological effects of the sentiment. They can even measure the physical effects in the brain of that sentiment. So the reason why it's so well studied is it's a direct way to measure the impact of compassion and kindness on the brain, on circuits of the brain, on our neurochemistry, on our biology, on the heart, on the immune system, on the inflammatory process. And that's why it's so well studied.
Yeah, and one of the areas you're pointing to is the prefrontal cortex. That's one of the areas it does seem to have quite a big impact on, doesn't it?
Yeah. And particularly the medial prefrontal cortex, the bit that's got a bigger role in the experience of happiness and joy and positive emotions. And what it means is, as we cultivate this sense of compassion and kindness through, think words along the lines of, may you be happy and well and safe, may you feel at ease, or whatever iteration, there's lots of iterations of these words, it's the sentiment that matters. Then as we shape these brain circuits, it means that happiness and joy and positive mood, positive emotional states become more accessible to us. Doesn't guarantee it, because we know, say, that life happens, doesn't it? It doesn't mean I do this meditation, I'll always be blissfully happy. But it does make it more accessible to you, because the muscle, so to speak, if you use the analogy with growing a muscle in your body when you go to the gym, the muscle that accesses positive states is more developed. So it just means that these states are more accessible to you, given the average context of a person's life.
And this meditation and also kindness in general really encourages the flood of oxytocin as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I refer to oxytocin because it plays such a central role in the experience of kindness and compassion. I refer to it as a kindness hormone, or even a heroism hormone in a slightly different context. And I call it the kindness hormone because it's well known as the love hormone, the cuddle chemical, the hug drug, because we know that it's involved in affection. and love and affection and support. But part of love and affection and support is kindness. So it's also a kindness hormone. We just never really thought about it in that kind of sense. And it's particularly a kindness hormone when you have an experience of kindness, like elevation, like when the people in San Francisco helped you and your family. That sense of connection and warmth that you feel with them, that immediately is generating kindness hormones. And what's remarkable is in the brain, they are the antidote to stress. What they actually do is they turn down the intensity of stress regions of the brain. It's one of the reasons why I have a whole chapter in the book explaining and showing why kindness is the opposite of stress. We think of the opposite as peace or calm as the opposite of stress. Peace or calm are the absence of stress, not the opposite. The opposite of stress, neurologically and physiologically, is an experience of kindness. But kindness hormones have a particularly potent effect on the heart. And research in this actually began years ago when scientists began to wonder why it was that women who were nursing their infants, why it was that they had lower blood pressure than normal. And it was always just assumed out as nice, relaxed feeling. But some researchers began to look deeper and they found that nursing an infant produces oxytocin. But they actually found that our blood vessels are lined with parking bays. They're actually called receptors, but they're parking bays that are the exact snuggly fit for oxytocin, for kindness hormones. And what that means is when you have an experience of kindness and you produce oxytocin or kindness hormones, they actually park on the lining of our blood vessels, and that actually causes a physiological change where the blood vessel expands and we get a drop in blood pressure. So kindness is actually cardioprotective. It protects the cardiovascular system. I even cited a wee study when researchers even took people who had been diagnosed with hypertension, with high blood pressure, and they gave all of them a sum of money each week for 3 weeks. Half of them, they said, spend the money on yourself, do whatever you like with it. The other half said, do something good with it, spend it on other people. After the 3 weeks, when they all reported back and had their blood pressure taken, those who'd spent the money on others, who'd done something good with the money, who'd been kind, had much lower blood pressure, systolic and diastolic, than those who'd spent the money on themselves. So here you had an actual measurable outcome of people with hypertension who now had more healthy blood pressure. And the effect size was as big as the effect of blood pressure lowering medication or even exercise.
That's amazing.
Isn't it
It's
amazing?
just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And aging too, because obviously we don't look our ages because we practice loving kindness. We obviously look a lot younger than we do. But no, that's actually true, isn't it? We can look,
It really is true. And if you think about it, I remember when I first explained this, that experiences of kindness can actually slow the aging process. And I remember sometimes people were so skeptical that, oh, come on. And it's because it sounds so out there, it sounds so woo-woo. But let's put it in another context. One factor we know is an absolute accelerator of aging is stress. And if kindness is physiologically the opposite of stress, then it's pretty obvious that kindness is going to slow the aging process. What I particularly love is we now have begun to probe exactly why and how that works. And one of the things is kindness hormones. In fact, really in skin cells, one of the factors that cause aging in skin or accelerate aging in skin are things called free radicals. And free radicals can be increased in skin cells when we have, let's say, too much exposure to intense sunlight. It can also be, unhealthy diet. It can also be mental and emotional stress. But whatever the cause, we get high levels of free radicals in our skin cells, and the free radicals cause havoc in the body. They age the brain. They're implicated in dementia. They're implicated in heart disease, stroke, all these kind of things. They literally age the body. In fact, free radicals are responsible for why an apple left on a table wrinkles really fast. It's called, we call it oxidation, but it's really, chemically, it's caused by free radicals. It's because apples don't have natural processes in the body that generate antioxidants. So without antioxidants, apple skin just wrinkles really, really fast. We generate things called antioxidants through diet, but also through naturally. And one of the major antioxidants we generate is kindness hormones, oxytocin. So researchers took skin cells, they subjected them to stress, and they aged really fast. There was high levels of free radicals. Did the same experiment in the presence of our kindness hormone. Amazingly, the levels of free radicals dramatically dropped. There was far, far fewer free radicals. And so here's the thing. You can't eat kindness hormones. You can't drink kindness hormones. You can't, put them on any creams. You have to make them. And one of the ways we make them is through the quality of person that you're being. And amazingly, they actually have an anti-aging effect on our skin. We also know from other research on meta practice, they even slow down the wear and tear of DNA end caps called telomeres. In fact, researchers compared people doing mindfulness versus meta, and they found a massive slowing of the rate of loss of telomeres, these little genetic timers, if you will, on our DNA, whose rate of loss is directly proportional to the rate of aging of the body. And meta itself, through the cultivation of compassion and kindness, caused a dramatic slowing of the rate of loss of these telomeres.
It's so compelling, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I really do hope that more people that haven't heard of you start reading this book and it gets passed around, because I just think what a healthy and lovely society we will have, healthy.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we go, I just want to ask you a little bit about your own meditation practice. I know that you've been meditating for quite a long time. Do you do the same thing every day, or do you kind of change it around, or what do you
I
tend
kind
to
of
do?
vary it, and sometimes in response to the context of my life. But my main go-to practices are mindfulness and metta. These are the ones that I go to most of the time. But I find myself sometimes where I focus more on one than the other. But now, because of the research I've done in the book, even when I do a standard mindfulness practice, I always infuse it, even if it's just a minute of a 5-minute practice, but just thinking of people that I know and just wishing that something amazing happens for them today, or even someone I know is having a hard time, and just a wee silent prayer. May you have a release of worry today. May something really positive and magical happen for you today. Even just a tiny little bit of prayer, bit of kindfulness, and then I go on with my mindfulness practice.
A little stealth moment, isn't it?
Yeah,
I really
absolutely.
like that, and I like that it's really personalized,
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, and I love that as well about metta is, what we wish for ourselves, we wish for other people,
Yeah.
and sometimes the things that we wish for other people, we can bring it back to ourselves as well,
Yeah,
and wish
absolutely.
it towards ourselves. So yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So do you do meditation in the morning? Is it like a sort of midday? Is it evening thing, or do you mix it up?
I kind of mix it up. I always do a little bit in the morning, but I do probably more of it later in the day. Only because I find sometimes in the morning, I find, because I'm more productive in the morning, very productive. So I find I'm always the excitement of wanting to get on with things. And so my meditation practice in the morning, I make it shorter because I tend to my mind wanders a bit more. But I find in the afternoon or in the evenings, I get a much deeper practice. And so I don't try to force a still mind in the morning. So in the mornings, I might do a longer session of metta rather than a mindfulness, because it's more productive for me, rather than trying to force myself to just, focus, be still and all that. It's easier, I find, if I just say, okay, I'm naturally thinking because I'm quite energized in the morning. Anyway, I'm a morning person. So let's do something that I use my mind for it anyway, and just at least direct it
Yeah.
towards compassion
I
and
think
kindness.
you're right, and you can't force it. It just, it needs to be at the right time for you, doesn't it? I'm the opposite way round. I'm better with a longer practice first thing in the morning because I'm a
Yeah,
night owl. And
yeah.
so, yeah, I find that I need to hit the reset and then I can carry on with my day.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Uh,
that's the beauty of the flexibility of the practice, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and sometimes I can go through wee phases depending on how busy I am, where I might chunk up my practice so that I do maybe 4 or 5 sessions of 5 minutes a day.
Mm.
Then other times I might do, 2 15s, or I might do a half an hour or something. So I don't stick to the same all the time.
Yeah.
I make sure that I meditate, but how long I do it in any one sitting kind of varies depending on what I need at that particular time.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the research in the past tended to look at 20-minute practices, but we're
Yeah,
seeing more research now that do look at shorter practices,
yeah.
and that, even a small amount can make a huge difference,
Yeah,
can't
I
it?
get quite a lot out of a larger number of small practices. So I found recently, especially when I find I've got a lot going on and I don't want to neglect my practice, I think, well, I can easily squeeze 5 minutes in here, because what I'd probably have done is go on social media and I could lose 10 minutes going through and then posting and sharing kind of stuff. And I thought I could maybe make better use of that time by just putting my phone away. In fact, what I physically do, Sarah, I go like that and I throw it across the room to a settee where I'm sitting, but this is the opposite end of the room from where I have my desk. And I literally throw my phone over and it bounces off. It's all cushions and stuff
Yeah.
here. And it's a symbolic act that says, I'm going to spend this time
Yeah.
working on myself. And it's a symbolic act as I throw it across the room. Once or twice it bounces onto the floor, but most of the time it gets captured by these kind of comfy cushions and stuff. So it's a kind of symbolic act that says, I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm not going to be disturbed by it. I'm taking this 5 or this 10 minutes to myself.
Wonderful. And I think it's healthy for us to commit to like a daily devotion, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, David, it's been so lovely do you know what? There's so much more that I could ask you. I've got a list of things, and but what we have covered is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, great.
And I would say that if anyone hasn't yet read the book, The Joy of Actually Giving a Fuck, they really should. I've been raving about it all week, and I'm almost using it a bit like an oracle as well, of like
Oh,
randomly
thank you.
opening at different pages and getting a bit of inspiration from the page. That's how much I've really enjoyed reading it from cover to cover. So thank you
Well,
very much.
well, thank you.
And
That's great feedback, because you always find, and you'll know this from your own book as well, that when a book comes out, you're almost kind of, you've been so close to it for so long, and now all of a sudden your mind is shifting, thinking, now I'm kind of relying on what people think.
yes,
And you
yes,
don't know what people think until you get reviews on Amazon, for example, or until people like yourself tell you, but so you don't really know. So it's almost you're in a kind of waiting thing, and what do I do? I've been so doing all the work that now the work's finished or the work's changed to a different type of work now. But you're waiting now, and you're just anticipating, hope people like it, kind of
yeah.
thing.
Well,
And I'm kind of at that point now. I hope people like it.
yeah, I mean, I know when I put my book out there, I wanted to hide underneath the diner and table for about two
Yeah,
weeks because it's a very vulnerable
it
feeling to
really
put
is.
something of yourself. But also, I know with yourself and me too, the desire is for it to help. That's what it's there for. And you
Yeah,
want to know that it is
yeah,
actually making that difference, that people
yeah.
are getting it and it making a difference to their lives. And
You know,
I
I
do,
got I got some wonderful feedback the other day there, and from people that I was actually hoping would find the book. So one of the managers in my local M&S shop, he's always so friendly and nice to me and stuff, and he'd been asking for ages, when's your book coming out? I really hope it does well. He's a really nice person, a guy called Dale. So I decided, when I got advanced copies of the book about a week before the book came out, I signed a copy and gave it to him. He was so overcome, he couldn't believe it. Anyway, I never gave it another thought. And then a week after the book came out, he came over and says, David, and he was just so overcome with how much he enjoyed the book, because he'd never read a book like this before. It's not the sort of books that perhaps himself or his wife would have picked up in a shop. And he kept saying, and then you said this, and then what was amazing is about when you're being kind and it has this effect on your blood pressure. He said, it's amazing how you described it, because he said, I did science at school, but you made it so simple and accessible. I really understood what you were talking about. And he said, and he kept going on about different things, and he was just so overcome with how amazing, how much he got from the book, that he didn't ever know that books like this existed
oh,
in the
that's
world. And
wonderful.
I came away and I felt like I was floating in air, because that's
Yeah.
exactly the type of response I wanted. Because as well as trying to reach people who are familiar with my work, which is why I've got a lot of brand new stuff in the book, I also wanted to reach people who've never read anything like this kind of stuff, which is why some of the stuff in the book I've written in other books, but I just completely changed the style of writing this time. to make it much more accessible and quirky and cool. But I also wanted to show that content to people who've never, like Dale, who would never ordinarily pick up a book like this. And the enthusiasm he had for it just really, it absolutely made my day. It absolutely made my day.
Absolutely, yeah, and it does those kind of things. And so he was doing a kind act to you.
He
And
was,
there you
yeah.
go, whoosh.
And ripple effect, you know,
Yeah,
it really picked me up. I found myself being, you know, even more gentle and supportive and encouraging to people as the day went on. Ripple effect of his.
Yeah,
And he probably
absolutely.
wasn't trying to be kind. He was just enthusiastically saying, because he's a nice person, just enthusiastically, and kept me talking for ages. He kept wanting to say, and then you said this, and then you said this, and you could tell he'd really dived into the book
Yeah.
and got so much from it that he just didn't know existed in the world. This kind of stuff, this knowledge.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
surprised. So, David, you are the embodiment of kindness. Thank you
Oh,
so
thank you,
much
Sarah.
for doing this podcast with us, and wishing you all the success with this book. I think
Thank
you
you.
will. Take care.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye then.
Bye.